Metro News Talkline is presented by Encova Insurance, encircling you with coverage to protect what you care about most. Visit Encova.com to learn more.
Second hour of Metro News Talkline. We're in the Encova Insurance Studios. Once again, say good morning to our great radio affiliates across the state of West Virginia. We appreciate you letting us be part of your day. Jake Link is our video producer. Ethan Collins is our radio producer. TJ's in Charleston. I'm in Morgantown. 800-765-TALK is the phone number. 800-765-8255. 304-TALK, 304. That is the text line. We'll still get to the text line. Oh, they're rolling in now. Get some of your texts coming up. A little bit later, we'll talk with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, get an update on the potential impacts of the rollback of Clean Water Act regulations on drinking water sources, particularly in the Charleston area. That's coming up bottom of the hour. Once again, good morning, TJ, down in Charleston.
Morning, buddy.
What were you doing there during the break, by the way? I saw you on the camera, on the spy cam.
Oh, someone had sent me a note the other day and said, getting weird feedback, said they would be interested in seeing what the studio looked like.
Oh, yeah.
I said, you know what? I can do that. And I just hadn't gotten around to it, so I filmed it, and I will put it on my Facebook page.
We were, not to get creepy, but Jake and I were talking out in the production room, which is over there if you're watching on the TV. Mm-hmm. And we go, what's he doing? Is he FaceTiming somebody? I think he's recording a video.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was curious. I'm like, you know what? We'll just ask him when we come back.
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, a little tour. I was talking with a friend of mine, actually in Washington, D.C., and she'll listen on occasions, and it's just like, so you do this out of your house? I said, no, I go to a studio. And she's like, well, what's it look like? I said, well, you know what? I'll take care of that. And then I filmed it, and I thought, well, other people may want to know, so I just put it on the Facebook page.
I find that, we'll get to Robert Bolton here. I am fascinated, and I think there's something to the reason shows like Dirty Jobs worked. Mm-hmm. And some of the things you find on YouTube, I'm a sucker for farming videos. My wife makes fun of me, but seeing how other people do their jobs and getting that curtain pulled back a little bit to understand what goes into being an electrician, what goes into being a farmer, what goes into being, a radio host, the kind of things you work in every day. I find that stuff fascinating about other people's careers that I don't know that much about. So maybe we take that for granted too often.
I think we do. One of the most enjoyable parts of my energy career was at a time when I was an account manager dealing with large customers that use a lot of electricity. And you would take those folks and take them to a power plant and let them see. I can't tell you how many people I've taken to John Amos over the years. Mm-hmm. And once they see that, I mean, it's eye-opening to them. And I think your point stands. That's why, people like watching Mike Rowe. They like seeing this and that and going, it's kind of like Mr. Rogers. Remember, he used to take us to the post office and he'd take us to the bread factory and all these. It's just interesting. So, I kind of geek out on that too.
All right, Jake, get on that. Our next Metro News TV project. We'll do some sort of behind-the-scenes show. We're working. We got ideas we're working on, by the way, Jake and I. $1 million ideas for the video side.
Well, I wish you all well.
Or at least $100 ideas, possibly. All right, TJ's got a commentary over at WVMetroNews.com this morning as questions continue to swirl about the health of Kentucky Senator and former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. His office has been very coy about his health status, releasing few details on his health updates or if or when he will return to the Senate. Of course, the rumor mill is fully churning. And, TJ, you get into the question this morning. It's not a new question. This conversation has come up many times. But what about an age limit for elected officials?
Yeah, and it is a question, it has a lot of salience. People like to talk about it when it pops up, especially when we read with what Mitch McConnell is going through. And, of course, we wish him the best. I do think, Dave, his staff has invited a lot of this by not being more direct with people and letting them know the senator's condition. But at what point, perhaps, has the body outlived the mind? I don't know that the framers ever thought about that. They certainly, as I argue in the piece and note from various portions of the Federalist Papers, they certainly wanted a level of stamina. They wanted a level of intelligence, experience, character that they thought would not manifest itself until certain ages. So they put caps on the House, or age minimums, I should say, on the House and the Senate and the presidency, respectively. So I think we can be respectful. We can ask this question. It's not necessarily about McConnell or Trump or Biden or whoever is next, but I think it's a question that we owe ourselves an answer on. And frankly, I think our leaders in Washington should be talking about this, and they're not. So read the piece, and very curious to see what people think about this.
Let's bring Robert Bolton into the conversation, friend of the program, Fairmont State University political science professor. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, TJ. And I will just say, as a brief side note, I was listening in at the beginning of your conversation, and I did chuckle because I know as a lawyer, people always enjoy when I bring them into the courtroom. They find it very fascinating, unless, of course, they are the criminal defendant.
Yeah, they might not be so interested in it.
Yeah, they're not as thrilled under those circumstances.
So, Robert, let's put some context to this conversation. There are minimum age requirements outlined in the Constitution for Congress, for Senate, for president. Why not on the other end? Why not age maximums?
Well, that's a great question. I would say you, quite frankly, can look even here in West Virginia for some great examples of both extremely young and extremely old members of Congress. We had the youngest U.S. senator ever elected from West Virginia. He was a guy named Rush Dew Holt, who was elected during the New Deal era. He was only 29, and he actually had to wait about 6 months before he was able to take his seat. And then you had on the other end, you had Robert C. Byrd, who was the longest serving U.S. senator of all time. And he'd served for a little over 50 years. I think it was 51, maybe 52 years before he passed away. And no disrespect towards Senator Byrd or his family, but I had a few run-ins with him in the years prior to his death. And to be blunt, it was pretty obvious that he was in pretty steep mental decline. And he's not the oldest person who's ever served in the U.S. Senate. That would be Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. He was literally 101 years old, maybe even 102, before he finally retired.
So, Robert, critics, well, I won't say critics, people who have chimed in on this piece and this issue, they say, you know what? We have something to safeguard against that, TJ. They are called elections. And the people still, despite knowing of these mental declines and knowing of the age, still elect these people. So what's your problem with it, is what they have told me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong.
The cynic in me says that's all well and good, but it's important to remember individuals have a huge incumbency advantage. We all say, oh, we need to throw all the bums out of Congress, except for my congressman, because I happen to like him because he sent me a nice letter when my first son was born, or he attended some meeting and remembered my name from the last time we met. So they like their own person, and that's why you have people who have been in there for 30, 40, 50 years who may not be at the top of their game anymore. And I should emphasize, I do know many people who are in their 70s and 80s who are still very mentally alert and are capable of doing the job. But on other occasions, you do have individuals who have been in there for a long period of time. They aren't able to do as well. But because they are already in power, they are able to use their current authority to basically strong-arm out of the way anyone else. Now, I will say you have seen a couple of occasions in recent years where you have seen long-term incumbents who have been either voted out of office or more or less pressured into retiring. For example, out in California, you had Dianna Feinstein, who was a former mayor of San Francisco, I believe the first female senator from California ever. In her last couple of years, it was very obvious she was suffering from dementia. And basically got to the point where a couple of congressmen from California and other California politicians announced, hey, we're going to run against her. And people were reading the tea leaves and saying this is going to create some very awkward questions for the senator about her legacy, and be it her family, her staff, her campaign donors, someone eventually persuaded her to retire with dignity. And then she died, just a couple of months later. You see it all the time.
Robert Bolton joining us, Fairmont State University political science professor. Robert, let's say there was an age limit, 75, 80, whatever the case may be. Could it stand up to a legal challenge?
Constitutionally, absolutely not. Right now, there are minimum age requirements for most of the federal elected offices. It's 25 if you want to be a U.S. congressman. It's 30 to be sworn in as a U.S. senator, and it's 35 to be the U.S. president. And you say, well, why should it be 35 for president? The idea behind the Founding Fathers was they wanted someone with some seasoning to them. They wanted someone with some experience. And they said 35 rather than, say, 45 or 50, because it's important to remember the average lifespan in 1787 was right around 40 or 45 years old. There were plenty of people who lived to be into their 70s and even their 80s at that time, but it was not quite as common. And if you look at the Founding Fathers, even George Washington, when he died, he was only in his early 60s. Abraham Lincoln was only 51 when he was elected president. But what you've seen in the course of the 20th and 21st century as medical care has improved, as the quality of life has improved, as it's quite frankly a less harsh world on the human body, people are living longer and longer. And so you're seeing the average age of whoever is elected president, who's ever in Congress, being pushed upward. But if someone were to say, we're going to, let's say the legislature of West Virginia said there will be no congressman elected over the age of 70. Well, immediately, Congressman Miller or, Senator Justice would justifiably sue and say there's no additional requirement in the Constitution. You can't impose any additional burdens that are not in the Constitution. The same thing came up in the 1990s when some of the southern states attempted to impose term limit restrictions, where they said you can only serve X number of terms in Congress before you're not eligible to run again. I think you would see the same challenge to any state or federal law that attempted to impose an age requirement, and I think the law would probably be struck down as a constitutional matter. Same thing if you tried to impose something requiring someone pass a cognitive exam. I think that one might have a better chance of survival, but I don't think that many politicians would want to invite that type of scrutiny upon themselves. And so I will be very surprised if you see something like that ever passed at either the state or federal level.
The brilliance of the Constitution is that it can be changed through the amendment process. Does this issue ever rise to a level of concern in America where citizens will do what is necessary for a constitutional amendment to add such restrictions?
Maybe, but it's been my experience that usually amendments only arise after there's been some type of significant crisis that has affected the republic. So, for example, the big Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments, only came in the aftermath of winning the war against the Confederacy and the abolition of slavery. The lowering of the age requirement for voting, the 25th Amendment, only came about because of the strong political debates going on over the war in Vietnam, saying we have 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are fighting and dying in Southeast Asia, but they're not allowed to vote on their congressman who sent them to war. So I think in order for something like that to happen, where you have a requirement that someone pass a mental competency exam or a health check, or there be an age cap, I think you would have to see something like, to be blunt, probably the president of the United States being diagnosed with a fatal illness or severe cognitive decline while they are in office. Because even right now, there are measures in place to declare the president incompetent, and there are measures in place where Congress can remove a congressman from the body if the Congress determines it's appropriate. But those are both very difficult things. I really wish we did have a more serious conversation about this. Obviously, a few years ago, there was discussion about whether or not Joe Biden was competent in the last, especially year or two that he was serving as president, if he'd been declining precipitously. Especially that June of 2024 presidential debate really put that in the spotlight after years of denial from his staff. You're seeing conversations among critics of Donald Trump today, whether or not he's mentally declining. And even going back to Ronald Reagan in his last years in office, he appeared mostly lucid and appeared to be capable of doing the job, but 5 years later in 94, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. 5 years back, was he already showing symptoms? I've seen neuroscientists who say probably not, but still the fact that that's even a conversation is pretty concerning. The last thing I would say is of course, there is one risk here, guys. If you do put an age cap, and let's say no one's eligible for federal office after 80, most demographic experts say we're only going to continue to get older, especially with new advances in medical care. It's very well possible that if the average American person lives to be, say, 78, 79 today, who's to say that the average American won't be 85, 90, or maybe even 100 years, 50 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. Interesting conversation, Robert. Glad you could be a part of it this morning.
Absolutely. Very much enjoyed this, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. 800-765-TALKS, the phone number. 304-TALK. 304 is the text.